Hey there, everyone. It is Sunday. It is Christy. Welcome to Weekend Winters. It's time where you and I, well, mostly I talk and you listen. So, just looking at my levels here. Apologies for the slight delay. I hope you enjoyed the music, though, while you waited. I just kind of lost track of time today. I got caught up in reading articles, and then I had to wash my hair, which is why it looks ridiculous. But we're just gonna go with it. So, I thought about doing like an opening, sort of like a longer opening where we talk about stuff, but I think considering the content and the topic, I just want to jump right into it. So for those of you who haven't seen the title, content warning, this, I know normally we try to like keep it chill on a Sunday, but this came up and I wanted to address it because I think it's materially relevant to what's going on in politics. So, just a quick content warning, we're going to be discussing sexual assault, sexual harassment, so, and also accusations. Now, I should say, I can see people in the chat. My sound is good and my hair's fine. Thank you. Thank you to Lucky Wonder. Appreciate that validation, especially as we are all, as you know, like weeks into lockdown already. Okay, let me do a little bit of a quick background on this to just catch everybody up. People living in the current year will have these details to hand, but obviously people from other countries or people who watch this in the future might not. The account, according to my best recollection, and also there's something else I want to talk about. The way I've decided to set this up, I am going to, in the first section of this, merely look at observable facts. I'm going to really try hard not to characterize anything because I think you guys are completely capable of making up your own mind. So I want to present what is out there as independent facts, above and beyond anyone's opinion, just things that we can all look at and agree are accurate or true or factual. And I'm going to afterwards give my opinion and my assessment. Okay? Because like I said, I trust you all are grown-ups. And I trust that if you are presented with evidence, you can come to your own conclusions. The other thing I want to say on this is that I have friends on both sides of this issue. I have people that I adore and respect who accept the accusations and they think that this incident happened. I have people that I adore and respect who don't. And so, obviously I have my own take, but I'm not coming at this with an agenda to destroy people who are standing behind Tara Reade. And I am not here to promote like a character assassination. I'm not interested, and I don't think it's good use of anyone's time to try to speculate about her motives when it regards Putin or Bernie or anything else. I personally think we should just look at the evidence that we have, evidence in her own words, evidence of things that she chose to write in phrases in the ways that she had complete freedom to phrase them. And that has been my focus, if you guys have watched my show. And I hope it continues to be my focus, because I think that's really where the most sort of information that's devoid of those political contexts can be found. So, very quickly, I'm going to just zoom this up a little bit, because you guys in the chat are only at 90%. I'm going to up it here. All right, there we go. Okay, the Democratic establishment. So, sorry, we got somebody, a naysayer in the chat already. I just want you to know, Matt Young, the Democratic establishment, those are what you call the voters. So unless you want to condemn like 70% of the people who were voting in the last election, this is not about the Democratic establishment. Democratic establishment doesn't really exist. It's a sort of conspiracy theory that's put out by people who don't really participate in the Democratic Party and don't really have an understanding of the inner workings. So, like I met a lot of establishment Democrats. I called county chairs, and they're usually volunteer, and they're organizing things on their own time. They're not establishment. They're good people. All right, with that said, a little defense there. So, what's the timeline on here? Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders were the last two candidates, really, in the Democratic primary starting in March. In March, late February, I think she started to sort of make noises about it, but in March of 2020, Tara Reade came forward with to Katie Halper, who is a podcaster, relating a story of sexual assault that she says she experienced at the hands of Joe Biden. Now, subsequent to that initial accusation, there have been a lot of press reporting, like press investigations, press reporting, and I guess the fairest way to characterize it is to say that there is not a consensus amongst people in terms of whether or not these accusations are credible, whether or not people have been convinced by them. People on the left, on both sides, are on both sides, I should say. There are people who are progressives and feminists who side with Tara Reade. Sorry, I have to moisturize. It's really dry for some reason. And people who are on the left and progressive also have serious questions and think that she's not a credible witness. So, as you guys know, again, I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. I have, on this channel, tried to stick with the facts. I have been critical of those who attack her reputation by going after things like her love of Putin or trying to gaslight her, and also, trying to discredit her by saying she's a Sanders supporter. I mean, those are things that are literally irrelevant to whether or not she's making a credible claim. And I stated back in 2018, I can find the tweet if you want, that for me, when it comes to Me Too, the biggest contribution that Me Too has made to changing the conversation around these kinds of accusations is that it is not now the default that we say, okay, we have to believe the man and a woman or a victim, because, there's also a conflation of women with victims, and not all victims are women. So that also makes me slightly uncomfortable, although I understand that disproportionately they're women, it gets complicated. But when, so what was I saying? Sorry, go back, rewind. Yeah, I've already forgotten. I got myself off on a tangent that was unrelated to that. Coming back to this, so I want to look at Tara Reade's own words, because Tara Reade's been talking about something, not this particular accusation, but she has been in the press for more than a year now, talking about her experiences working in the Biden office. And as you know from other shows, this story has kind of evolved over time, and that was my main issue with Tara Reade. I don't expect a victim to have perfect recall of the incident itself. It's traumatizing. There's also just a natural psychological reaction to avoid thinking about the trauma, to move your thoughts away, and therefore you don't dwell in the memories because they're really super traumatic. I understand that, and I would never expect anyone who comes forward as a victim to have perfect recall of the date and what they were wearing and what the other person was wearing and the color of the paint. That's ridiculous. However, there were incidents that have nothing to do with the trauma that she just couldn't keep straight. For instance, one of the things I pointed out was the fact that when she first told her story, the earliest version of her story of leaving Biden's office, she claimed she quit. She decided to go to West, I think it was, with her partner, boyfriend at the time. It was like an adventure, and it was like part of the narrative of, I quit, I was leaving this behind, I'm taking control of my life. Then the narrative changed when she started to tell the story about her staff problems. And at that point, as we'll see, she was saying that there was nothing sexual happening with Biden, but she was really mad at his staff for the way they treated her. And as a knock-on effect, she was mad at him for not knowing that she had problems and taking care of it, something along those lines. So in that case, she framed it as she was asked to resign, or she was forced to resign. She basically had to quit at that point. Okay, so that's another version. It's not that she quit and she did it herself. She was forced to resign. And then another version came out later when she made her accusation about sexual assault, saying that she was fired, that Biden had fired her. Well, which one is it? It can't be all three. You can't say, I quit and I decided to move, I was forced to resign, and then, I was fired. Like, only one of those things happened. And those are the details that she doesn't have to make things up about. There's no reason to change those details, if you see what I mean. And she also changed the name of the person she told in the chain of command. These are details that you just don't need to change. Right, so my criticisms of Reade have never been that she can't do perfect recall of the incident. It's that there seems to be too much flexibility around other events around the story that she tends to manipulate and change in order to shape a story to fit her current narrative. And because credibility in the Me Too movement, I think that's what I was going to say, the Me Too movement, in the court of public opinion, it's not that we assume the guy is guilty and the woman has all this burden of proof. It's that we say, okay, I think, I'm going to treat your claim as reasonable. I'm going to listen to you and look at your facts. And then I'm going to listen to the accused and see what he or she has to say and their facts. And then based on that, I'm going to weigh these up. And I personally think, for me, my evaluation is, who is more credible? When with Louis C.K., when two women came forward, and they said, we were in this room, and this is what he did. And then he came out and said, yeah, I did that. Like, well, yeah, that's incredibly credible, because everybody agrees on the incident. And when we look at Joe Biden and his past, did he have boundary issues? Yes. But there is a real misrepresentation of him being a sexual predator because of boundary crossing that women who were touched said weren't sexual. All right, so there's a real, I think, manipulation of like crossing lines. And the other thing, too, that I would just want to point out, Biden was doing boundary crossing behavior. He accepts it. Everyone knows about it. He also acknowledged it, and he apologized for it, and he stopped. So at some point, you have to let people evolve. You have to let people be better. And it seems to me the anti-Biden people don't want to let him be better. They want to label him as a sexual predator, where he's not, in terms of what has been discussed in the past, in order to bolster what I think is a pretty tenuous claim in the current situation. Hi, Striped Mongoose. Don't worry, you're late. I was late too. I was late for like 5 minutes. So, can I, before we start, I'm just going to quickly dip into the chat, see what you guys have to say. By Pagan Man, I wish the DNC had half the power birders think they do. Yeah, the DNC is really not that powerful. I mean, again, I worked for the state Democratic Party, and we pretty much ran ourselves, oversaw ourselves. I mean, this idea of conspiracy theory is, I guess it's easy. It's intellectually lazy. It's kind of like, having conspiracy theories about other ethnic groups, and the globalists, and that kind of code words, because then you don't have to deal with the responsibility that maybe there are people who just don't like your positions. But no, it's easier if there's an evil conspiracy theory that's stopping the true will of the people from coming forward. Right. What else do we got down here? I'm not sure what you believe, but to me, my understanding from all the reading has always been the same. Believe that when a woman comes forward, that they are being honest to the best of their recollection. It doesn't mean the recollection is accurate, because memory is never 100% accurate, but believe they are being honest to the best of their ability. Yeah. Believe all women means we should take accusations seriously and investigate them honestly. I agree with all these things. It's not a blanket. Believe women, and Me Too has never been, okay, now if we just make an accusation, everyone has to treat it as 100% credible and not question the victims, the alleged victim, the person making the accusation, and not do any investigations. Just like before, it wasn't, oh, she's a liar, she's a gold digger, she's a disgruntled employee, she's, a harpy. I mean, it's basically that mentality is flipping. The woman is definitely not credible to the man, or the perpetrator is definitely not credible. We need to look at the evidence. We need to look ahead. All right. Okay, so Matt Young, you're saying it's amazing to see power structures smear a woman at the same time protect powerful men. Great. Well, I'm hoping you're going to stick around now, because we're just going to look at words that Tara wrote herself. So we're going to look at that in the first instance, and then you can make up your mind as to what you think about what has happened here. So I think I've caught us up. How many minutes are we in? I wanted to make this short, but I have a feeling I went longer than I planned to, because I always talk more, 20 minutes. But only 5 minutes in. Okay, let's have a look at this. So as I said, Tara Reade in 2019 made an accusation that she was sexually harassed or touched. I guess, I don't want to say it's sexually harassed, because she actually... she kind of, in her own language, disqualifies that term a little bit. But anyway, she talked about an incident of inappropriate touching, boundary crossing, right? In 2019. And then starting in sort of the end of 2019 or the start of 2020, I'm not quite sure, but definitely by March, she had revised her account to include this charge of sexual assault. Now, what's interesting and I think illuminating is that Tara Reade, before she gave her podcast interview to what's her name, Halper, Jessica, Jenny, I don't know, something with a J, I think, Halper, she changed her 2019 article on her Medium post. However, an original version was preserved at the newspaper that she talked to in April of 2019. And we're going to look at the edits that were made and how they were made and how they were documented. So, by Pagan Man, I think a lot of people forget what it was like in the 80s or before. Sweetie, that's because people weren't alive in the 80s. We're old. That's true. Like, that just, when you weren't around, it's hard to say. Like, it's just, difficult to kind of talk about with people who weren't around and didn't have to deal with the kinds of norms and the ways that women's bodies were just considered kind of public property. Still in the 80s. All right, so this was done by Romans Research. This is a really, really well-documented article. I want to give props 100% to the person who wrote this. And I'm just going to read it out. All of the links, by the way, are below, so you can follow along in independent tabs if you want to. So, written by Romans Research. And now note here in the practice. On the 29th of April, they made a correction. The correction was Reade made the new allegation public on the 24th of March, not the 26th. And the date modified in the source code indicates the most recent edit. This will become clearer as we go along. Note, my goal is to make this article 100% reproducible and verifiable. All sources are public and can be easily checked. And I do encourage everyone who watches this to follow the hyperlinks in the description box below and follow along with me. Written as we start. In April of 2019, Alexandra Tara Reade, formerly McCabe, wrote on Medium about her experience with Joe Biden. At this time, she was alleging inappropriate contact of a non-sexual nature, one of several women to come forward about Biden's handsy behavior. On March 24th, 2020, Reade went public with a sexual assault allegation against Joe Biden. Given this was in addition to her prior account, her post on Medium underwent some level of scrutiny. To be absolutely clear, simply coming forward with new information is not changing her story. Abuse victims, will often speak up about their experiences in different pieces. This is not abnormal. I also want to concur with this. Just because you add details you were too embarrassed or afraid or didn't want to. I mean, and people who are victimized shouldn't feel embarrassed, but they do. They take on the shame that their perpetrators should have felt instead. And so when it comes to describing their attacks, again, I think we need to have a lot of patience and be very empathetic for that. So I would agree with this article on that. I just want to say that. However, retroactively editing prior statements is changing her story. Upon inspecting the web source's code, it appears Reade has done exactly that. On March 24th, the day she brought her new allegations against Biden, Reade edited her original Medium post. The post maintained its April 2019 date, making the article look like her updates were part of the original. These updates add significant new information. Now on this, I want to make a comment. Tara Reade is a well-educated woman. She has a law degree. She has a degree from a law school. She hasn't passed the bar, but she completed a law school program. She knows, therefore, how to do proper citations. She knows how to annotate things. She knows the importance of citing things. So I think we have to treat her as a very intelligent, capable woman here. I know people want to gaslight her and treat her as not intelligent, but I don't have that. I think we can expect very basic, intelligent things from her, right? And I also want to agree with this. It's one thing to expand on your story. It's one thing to add information, again, that is consistent with the past, things you've said, because you're not changing your story, you're adding details to it. right? It's another thing when you start to rewrite history. And we're going to look at the changes that were made from 2019 to 2020. Her Medium post can be found here, and I've already got it up here. This one, nope, that's the 2019 version. This is her Medium post, which is currently still dated as April 6, 2019. Her Medium post can be found here. Opening the source code, which is a simple right-click in Chrome, allows us to view some basic metadata. Below is the segment of interest with the relevant pieces bolded in red. I'm not quite sure how to find the source code. I manage to do that constantly when I don't mean to, and yet when I want to, I can't figure out how to do it. So if you guys want to, I'm going to take this as an accurate representation if anyone wants to check, but the person who's writing this is completely transparent with all their other changes. So I have a feeling if I was competent enough to open up the source code, I would do it. Right, so we've got here the date published. As you can see, this is the 6th. The original date published was the 6th of April, 2006. Is that still correct? Yep, April 6, 2019. And then it was modified on the 24th of March. Sorry, it's in the backwards date. 2023-24. So that's 2020, March 24th, 2020. Now, apparently the way that it works is that it doesn't keep track every time you update it. It tracks, the metadata tracks the last time, or the day you published it, and the most recent edits. And one of the good practices in a website is when you edit your website at a later point, you make a note, you update that, because you want to be transparent in the information you give. So all of these changes were made. We know the changes were made after the original was posted, but we can't say at what point all of these changes were made. Traditional internet archives do not have this article stored before March 26, 2020. Normally, this would stop us from viewing any old versions of the article. However, the Union also posted Reade's article in 2019, and this allows us to compare the original version to what the final version looked like by March 24th of this year. The original never modified version can be found here, published by the Union on April 17th, which we have right here. This is the same one. Accept and close. Let's zoom this so you guys can see it a bit easier, because we're going to be looking at these texts now a lot in the next bit. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Big, big, big. Okay. Right. Okay, published by the Union on April 17th, 2019. Reade tweeted this article the very next day and explicitly confirmed it was a correct accounting of her story. This hyperlink I've not looked at. And explicitly confirmed it was a correct accounting of her story a few days later. So, what does this say? This is her retweet. Tell the View your incredible story. I am a former Biden staffer. I spoke up about my supervisor and lost my job. Below is my story. I told my story again. I think it's okay. Well, I won't say that now. I'll say this later about the other news outlets that talk to her. So she is saying this is her story. She's verifying that this is her true and correct story. This is from April 26th, 2019. Reade continued to share the original as late as February of 2020 before editing her posts. So let's see what this says. Oh, she's still, sharing it here. No comments though, but it is 2020. And this is the Union version she's writing. She's sharing. This isn't her Medium. It's the union.com. Okay? So Reade it's just establishing she is backing the authenticity of the original blog post from the Union as she wrote it in 2019. Now we're going to look at the list of edits. So below I've listed the segment of the article that were materially altered, roughly in order of importance. And when the update had a word taken out, there is a red italicized with a strike through. And when a word has been added, it's in red and it's bolded. So let's have a look at the original. Nope. Let's look at the original. Find. All right, you can see here that in 2019, Reade says quite clearly, But this is not a story about sexual misconduct. So I'll start the top of the paragraph. We are sexual beings, and we are all trying to figure out how to express this aspect of ourselves at work and home lives. It is a journey our society is on right now. But this is not a story about sexual misconduct. It's a story about abuse of power. It's a story about when a member of Congress allows staff to threaten or belittle or bully on their behalf, unchecked, to maintain power rather than modify the power. So in 2019, Tara decided of her own volition to describe this story, the story she was telling, as not one about sexual misconduct. And for a year, that was what people saw if they chose to read this. And then there are edits made in March of 2020. So let's see what she says here. I think this should still work. Right. This time she writes, we are all sexual beings and are all trying to figure out how to express this aspect of ourselves at work and home lives. It is a journey our society is on right now. But this is not only a story about sexual misconduct. It's a story about abuse of power. It's a story about when a member of Congress allows staff to threaten or belittle or bully on their behalf, unchecked to maintain power rather than modify the behavior. This paragraph goes from basically saying there was no sexual misconduct to making an accusation of sexual misconduct by changing one word. That is a material edit. So again, but this is not a story about sexual misconduct. It is a story about abuse of power. Compared to, but this is not only a story about sexual misconduct. It is a story about abuse of power. Adding one word fundamentally changes it from excluding the possibility of sexual misconduct to basically making an accusation. And again, that edit, okay, so I'm going to try to be neutral. Right. In her original, she wrote, I am upset now and feel defensive again. All right, so let's look at this in her original. Yep, this is the original. Here's the line. I am upset now and feeling defensive. Again, somehow me talking about what happened is my fault. But in 2020, she changed it to say, completely, here we go. I'm upset now and feeling defensive. Again, somehow me talking about what happened, what Joe Biden did to me, is my fault. And I did not even tell the whole story. The small portion that did come out of what Joe Biden did to me resulted in me being bullied and threatened into silence. Well, that's a big change. So again, I'm upset now and feeling defensive. Again, somehow me talking about what happened is my fault. Becomes, I am upset now and feel defensive. Again, somehow me talking about what happened, what Joe Biden did to me, is my fault. And then the new section, and I did not even tell the whole story. The small portion that did come out of what Joe Biden did to me resulted in me being bullied and threatened to silence. Right. So the next one. Maybe as women we can speak up, she writes in 2019. I did not want to do that. I have no idea. Cancel. I don't have no idea what that was, but I didn't want to do it. Okay. Sorry for the technical problems, everyone. Live shows. All right. Maybe as women, we can speak up at the time and not lose our jobs or reputations if our boundaries are violated. Maybe we can start from there. That's what she wrote in 2019. In 2020, she edited the section to read, maybe as women, we can speak up at the time and not lose our jobs or reputations if our boundaries are violated. Maybe these men can modify their behavior or at least let them be held accountable. There needs to be restorative justice for victims who lost their jobs due to sexual harassment and assault. Maybe we can start from there. As you can see, in 2019, she did not make any comments about sexual harassment or sexual assault, but the edits in 2020 add specifically that information. Then I went to Senate personnel for help, she writes. No one helped me. I was moved into a solitary windowless office and told to leave. Let's have a look at her original. Da-da-da-da. Come on, come on. I'm struggling. How about this? Why can't I find this? Hold on. Apologies, all. I have to do it old school. Alright, try a different phrase. I'm not sure why this is working when it's worked every time before. Ah, there we go. Got it. Okay. Then I went to Senate personnel for help. No one helped me. I resigned, or would say I was forced to resign. I was told to look for another job. Then, in 2020, she edits that section to say, then I went to Senate personnel for help. No one helped me. I was moved into a solitary windowless office and was told to leave. I was fired. Or, should I say, I was forced to resign. No one would interview me on the Hill for any position. Again, why change this detail? From quit to... Okay, I'm sorry. I'm said I'm trying to keep my commentary down until we get through this. What started with promise and possibility, she wrote in 2019... ended with some prominent senator deciding that he liked my legs. So let's look at that. Oh, it's right here. In the aftermath, I did not feel competent or worthy of anything. My self-esteem plummeted and my career nosedived. What started with promise and possibility ended because some prominent senator decided that he liked my legs. I was sad and lost and moved on. Now, in the second one, her edits, she edited it to become more in line with the story. I'm just going to report. He ended because some prominent senator decided that he liked my legs and objectified me. I was sad and lost and moved on. My career on the Hill was over. I think we're almost to the end here. Oh, sorry, yes. I believe these gestures were not so much about connection, but establishing dominance in the room. All right, dominance. Okay, here we go. Here's the section she's talking about. My troubles had just started. Senator Biden would touch me on the shoulder or hold his hand on my shoulder, running his index finger up my neck during a meeting. Again, I did nothing. It was uncomfortable. Again, because it was kind of a dominant gesture. I do not like to be dominated, but he did this often to me. Others. But he did this to me. Others. Oh, sorry. Reread it third time. He did this often to me. Others, he was demonstrative. So basically she's saying what he did to her, just to translate because I've stumbled over it, was he was treating her in the same way he was treating everyone else, in this sort of dominant way, being an alpha male. This is her characterization in 2019. I believe these gestures were not so much about connection, but establishing dominance in the room. I kept silent when he did this. I respected him, but I feared him. In 2019... Sorry, she edited this yes, take that version, paste it here. Right, okay, well, there's some things that are not noted. At least I didn't notice them the first time because she's been like, she changes some of the things. All right, once again, I did nothing. It was uncomfortable. Again, because it was a kind of dominant gesture, and I do not like to be dominated. But he did this often to me. Others, he was demonstrative. I believe these gestures were not so much about connection, but establishing dominance in the room and power over others. I kept silent when he did this. I respected him, but I feared him. It's not a massive change, but it is a substantive edit. And then finally, I told Senator Biden wanted me to serve drinks at the event. So let's have a serve drinks at the event. Look at the original version, and then I'll show you the edited version, and then we'll talk about this. Here we go. I was told that Senator Biden wanted me to serve drinks at an event because he liked my legs and thought I was pretty. that becomes, I was told that Senator Biden wanted me to serve drinks at an event with some donors, all men, because he liked my legs and thought I was pretty. These events were often all older, white, wealthy males. Okay. And yeah. So then there's also immaterial changes such as spelling and punctuation. The author of this blog post goes on to write, "What all this means is up to you, but this much is clear. In the same day she accused Joe Biden of sexual assault, Tara Reade edited her previous statement to better match her new allegations." I would go further than that. Okay, Christy opinion time. The fact that she did not... Okay, here, let me give you the biggest problem I have with this. All right? I get, again, people might want to update things. They might want to reveal more information as time goes on. But when you do that, you need to be honest with the people who are reading your work. And my problem with this blog post, I'll just be succinct. I can go into the details, but this is... You still there, Matt? You're still here. Matt, this is my problem. Tara Reade is a graduate of a law school. She has a lot of experience. She's been volunteering with victims of sexual assault and domestic abuse, so she knows cops, she knows evidence, she knows the legal system. She knows how to do proper referencing. When she edited materially her post on Medium and did not update the publication date, or she did not explain to readers who were coming to her blog post after her accusations were made public, she's basically lying to all of us. This is because she's making material edits to not add new information, but to shape her story. To shape her story in a way that it fits this new version of her being assaulted, whereas the one she was writing in 2019 was, I mean, we can say, she actually says it's not sexual misconduct. She tells the reporter at the time she didn't feel objectified. She felt more, well, no, she didn't feel sexualized or something. She said she felt like a lamp. Like, oh, it's pretty, put it over there. But she never made any comments about that. And that was her decision to say, this is not a story about sexual misconduct. And really the one that gets me, the edit that really, really, really gets me as to why she is not credible and trustworthy, is the way that she added the word not to one sentence and she wasn't transparent about it. You get that? Do you get how manipulative and how deceptive that is? Because if she would have said, I have changed the story, here's my, I'm revising it. Here are all the edits I made because now my story, I feel like whatever, but she didn't disclose any of this. And the only reason we know of this is because the Union newspaper put up her original post from 2019 and left it up. And because she wrote it on Medium and published it there, she can change it there. So she went from saying, this is not a story about sexual misconduct in April of 2019 to saying this is not only a story about sexual misconduct without declaring the edit. This is a serious credibility issue. If she is willing to manipulate her past writings to conform with her current allegations, and she is not open and transparent about the edits she's making to her story, then why should we believe? You understand? Credibility is your currency. In terms of these public opinion issues, having a credible account that can be verified and backed up. And that's not like, yes, somebody told me a story. Like, people can, like, I understand there's about contemporaneous witnesses, right? The idea is something happened at the time, and you told people at the time because it establishes a timeline. But if you 2 years later, let's just say hypothetically, you tell somebody a made-up story 2 years later, that doesn't corroborate, that's not evidence that that story happened. It's evidence that you told somebody that something happened. But just because, like, if she tells her friend 5 years later, that's not evidence that, like, is contemporaneous at the time. Do you understand? And when she did come out about this the first time, the AP and the Washington Post did not include her in their coverage because they had problems with some of her story and it contradicted other reporting, which is why she went to this local paper. And that's why apparently they let her pen a column. But the tone and the language and the framing she used in 2019, you can believe that, Or if you were the one that she manipulated in terms of its framing, but didn't update the publication date, you can believe that. But these are two different stories. One is not a story about sexual misconduct. The other one is. And the thing is that this is her writing. She didn't have to say this is not a story about sexual misconduct. She didn't. It was, the reason why, everyone at the time who was coming forward was saying, I didn't feel sexually threatened, but I felt my boundaries were crossed. And Tara is telling a story that conforms with that narrative. Well, now she's got another narrative that contradicts her. So you understand, my problem here is the fact that she wasn't honest about the edits she made. She's too smart. If she is a graduate from a law school program, she is too smart to know that you don't have to annotate these kinds of changes. You really do. And you do it because you want to show people you have nothing to hide. This is, for me, a really, really serious flaw in her credibility. And the thing about credibility is when you give it up, when you surrender it, it is hard to get it back. It is so hard when people feel like they've been lied to. And, I went through and I had real issues with what I was seeing in terms of I quit my job. Then I was forced to resign from my job. Then Biden fired me. I was having problems with that. Because, again, I don't know about you guys, but I remember, there was one time in my life, I've quit all of my jobs for other jobs or for, going to school or whatever. I've 100% of my life have always been the person to initiate I'm going back in my mind, no, that's right. Well, I guess, okay, let me talk about the 2 times. All right, because one wasn't really okay, all right. So let's say there was 2 times in my life where I didn't leave a job to have something else go to it. The first time was when I worked for the Democratic Party. I was a fundraiser in election year. I thought for sure I was going to be continuing on my fundraising jobs for the next year for the state party, but the chair at the time told me that they were ending my position. And I went into my office and I cried. And then I took the afternoon off. And then I started looking for other jobs. And I actually found my next job so quickly that, because I was, I ended up giving 2 weeks notice, but I was asking, is it possible for me to leave tomorrow because Senator Shabilsky's office wants to hire me? And the chair who had just let me go was like, no, I need you for the full 2 weeks. Right. So that was the first time I was let go when I didn't start it. And then the other time, I guess I wasn't necessarily let go, but my boss I was working for the Secretary of the Department of Tourism, Senator Kevin Shabilsky. He had gone from working in the Senate to working for Governor Doyle, and then he brought me over to be his executive assistant. And about a month after I showed up, he got in a fight with the governor and resigned his position. And there was no place for me to stay. Really, I knew I was on the way out. So I ended up leaving that job as well. But I don't remember that I was fired per se. I think I just knew that it was time for me to move on. Okay. So I have very clear details as to whether or not I quit or I was fired in all of my employment. I don't buy this evolving story on I quit my job. Oh, I was actually forced to resign. And then I was fired. So, as I said, when it comes to issues of credibility, I think what I'd like to do now is talk about lessons moving forward. If you come forward with an accusation against a powerful person, you need to have your ducks in a row before you start the process. And that is clearly not the case. So if you want to compare 2 cases of having your ducks in a row and not having your ducks in a row, we can look at Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and we can look at Ms. Reade, because they had very different approaches. Dr. Ford got an attorney. Her attorney advised her to go to a professional lie detector center and be professionally, done with a lie detector, take a lie detector test. Now, I understand in terms of admissibility, some people believe lie detectors, some people don't. That, for me, that's not the point. The point is she basically said, look, this really happened, and the most rigorous thing is, I'll take a lie detector test. You can physically check my body to see if you can say, because I will tell the truth. I don't have to fear that. And she also did not go on social media. She did not give interviews here, there, and everywhere. She did not go, making Facebook posts. She did not put herself in the media and interact with the media. She basically spoke to her attorney, and then she testified under oath. Dr. Ford testified under penalty of perjury in public before us all to see. All right. Ms. Reade puts out one version in 2019, comes up with a new version, surreptitiously edits her old 2019 document without noting it, which is basically she's lying to everybody who read that Medium post and cited it as her being honest about what happened to her, because it's not. She's not being honest in this document. She's actually being deceptive in this document. So again, credibility problem's an issue. She went to random podcasters. She's just not had and she can say, oh, I don't have the money for a PR firm, blah, 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 blah. Still. The more you talk, the worse it gets. The more you talk, the more you're just going to say something that is just not particularly precise or off, people speak off the cuff imprecisely. And that's why we have attorneys. And you know what your attorney will tell you? Your attorney will always tell you, in these situations, don't make public comments. Why? Because an attorney wants to be able to control the words you use. And because they understand the importance of precision. And she's got a degree from a law school. She should know these things. She should be more careful with her language. I don't think she's an idiot. I don't think she's, mentally ill and incapable. She is making she's basically doing more to destroy her own credibility than her enemies are. So, if there is an allegation to be brought forward in these situations, it's really important that you think about your timeline. And try to assemble all your documentation. Try to get your ducks in a row before you go public. And then have a world of things that you have certainty that I can say with certain, or I think it's around, just try to be precise or at least consistent. Consistency is important, because if you're remembering things that really happened, you don't have to worry about changing your story. Because you're just remembering what you experienced. It's when you tell lies that you mess up your timeline. So, have your documentation in a row. Have your timeline correct. Understand the way to phrase things correctly before you talk to the press. So, and then this whole, getting in with one camp politically. Again, I don't think it's worth it to go after her motives, but certainly in terms of the look of it looks bad. And understanding that your credibility will be assessed against the person you're accusing, and kind of making an effort to protect yourself from accusations of, being inconsistent by just controlling and being very precise about what you say. And so, on the basis of these kinds of documented edits, which again, had she been transparent about the edits, would help her out so much. It would help her out so much if she's just honest, but she left that April 19th, 2009 date on her Medium post. This, to me, destroys her credibility entirely. Because she's not, again, and I want to come back to this because it really comes down to me comparing Biden's credibility with an accuser's credibility in a matchup. And when the accuser goes in and retroactively shapes her story in order to fit her current narrative without being honest and without being transparent and without documenting it, it immediately for me goes, why should I believe this version? I mean, what if I believe the 2019 version? Should I believe this version now? Are you going to have another version next week? And I wish I wasn't in this position. I wish none of us were in this position. I wish that she, none of these things would have ever happened and she would have whatever happened to her. But here we are. and you are being asked to make a decision, and I am being asked to make a decision, and I understand reasonable people can come to different conclusions. But when it comes to this issue, I'm going to tell you why I don't believe her. And it's not because I think she's a bad person, or she's a Putin puppet, or she's, some Bernie Sanders, whatever, fifth column. It's because Tara Reade lied to me. She lied to me, and she lied to everybody who read that Medium article thinking that it was actually what she had written in 2019. Fool me once, shame on me. No, fool me twice. Yeah, fool me once, shame on you. I'm doing a George Bush. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And at this point, I'm not going to let Tara Reade fool me again. I will need extraordinary independent corroboration because I can't believe the words that come out of her mouth because she destroyed her own credibility, in my opinion. Right? I know this is super harsh, super harsh, but I wanted to first present the facts, and I tried really hard. Like, sometimes I wanted to do commentary, but I wanted you guys, again, to look at it for yourself. And then I wanted to explain why I was so insulted and why I was so frustrated and angry and why I just feel like she's hurting the movement. And from this, I guess, if nothing else, because this claim now, I don't think anyone will take it seriously. I think her credibility, unfortunately, she's damaged her own credibility to the point where, yes, there are going to be people who believe her on the margins, on Twitter, in the Bernie camp or in the Trump camp, or whatever else. But, I look at down the line. Women in the Senate have looked at this and they're picking Biden in terms of who is more credible on this. And yes, this could always change if someone else came forward and had a similar experience with Biden and they reported it, because we know that one of the things about sexual predators is they tend to prey again and again and again. So I'm leaving the door for that possibility open because you always should. However, am I convinced based on the evidence of Tara Reade's own words and her accounts and the evidence she's brought forward that she is a credible witness and she's telling the story that I can believe in? No. I can't. So please, if anyone ever has an opportunity to advise, I hope no one, 1 in 4 people have been sexually assaulted, right? So there's a very good chance if you're listening to this has happened to you. And I don't know where you are with, if you're going to, in that process. However, I think what we can learn from the Tara Reade debacle is the importance of being judicious with what you say in public, doing prepared statements where you've had an opportunity to think about the implications of what you're going to say and anticipate that people are going to jump on your shit. Because of it, because there will always be people who are out to get you. And to make sure that you have all your evidence and that your evidence shows you are a credible, reliable, honest person. Because credibility versus credibility. Now, when we want to compare what Reade has done, I'll come to you in a second, Matt. When we want to compare what Reade has done in terms of her transparency, and we compare it to Biden, Biden did a flat denial. He did it first through his campaign. That didn't make the story go away. It didn't address people's concerns. This week he came out with a complete denial. And also he said, open up my records. Open up my art, open up, his, not in Delaware where his speeches are, but the Senate, in terms of his staff, giving permission for any record involving not only Tara Reade, if she filed a complaint that can be found, because now she's saying she did an intake form, not a complaint. He's saying that make anything public. Basically, I'm an open book. And it's really hard when someone is being accused, if they say, please go through I have nothing to fear. I have not, I remember my life. I remember running my office. I know this didn't happen. She's making an allegation. She has her ability to say something. I say, open up my records. I am an open book. And that level of transparency increases his credibility. All right, so How do I explain her neighbor and her mother confirming the story? One, her mother actually didn't confirm the story she's telling now. You have to remember that Tara Reade, Matt, had multiple versions of the story. The one that we were exposed to in 2019, in this one, is where she's mad at, I don't know if you've read this Union article, right? But we can just have a look at it, about how she decided to frame her own experience. All right, I am not a snowflake. I like to be touched, a lot. I'm an affectionate person. However, I like to decide who touches me and when. I did not understand or have the words back then to describe how I felt. I only sensed power moves and body language that I did not like. There was not yet the framework, as there is now. I just want to say the Bob Packwood scandal was happening in 1993. So actually, she did have a framework, and there was a whole process for this. So not credible. She goes on to write, I did not like Joe Biden's hand on me, not for the reason you think. It's because I am the alpha in the room. And again, I like to be the one who chooses who enters my space and in what way. All right. I did not like Joe Biden's hand on me, but not for the reason you think. It's because I'm the alpha in the room. I was told, yes. One day I got called into my office by my supervisor for reasons unknown. My stomach flipped over wondering what I'd done wrong. As I walked in a room, there were raised voices among the staff present. I wish she would name the supervisor. I would like to know the name of this person, because if there is a person who made her, who should have been named and brought up on sexual harassment charges, it's the supervisor. I was told that Senator Biden wanted me to serve drinks at an event because he liked my legs and thought I was pretty. However, to a senior female legislative aide, it was not okay, and she voiced her objections. I wish she would name this woman too, because this will establish credibility. Because the people in Biden's office, as she said she talked to, all say they don't remember. I would remember a sexual assault or a sexual harassment campaign. Nothing coming to mind. And she won't name names, so it would be helpful if she named names. I was asked to do many things based on my looks, and I did not know what value my intellect even held at the time, if any. Now, what is also troubling to me when it comes to Tara Reade's story is that Biden never told her she had nice looking legs. She heard it via this unnamed member of staff in a meeting, which is in a court of law hearsay. We don't know why the staff person, if they were relating accurately what Biden said. We don't know if they misheard Biden and reported an erroneous statement. We don't know if the supervisor was actually the one who liked Tara's legs and told her it was Biden. All right, we don't know any of those things, and neither does Tara. All Tara knows is that someone said, Biden said, he liked her legs. And that's not enough to be convinced, in my opinion, that Biden was the one responsible for this. The supervisor who is saying this is the one who should be held responsible for making her feel uncomfortable. If you want to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace, that supervisor should be named. Because that did make her, if that happened as she's describing, that would make her feel uncomfortable. But the idea that you can go from, I heard Biden said I had nice legs, to saying Joe Biden said I had nice, no, he didn't. He didn't. You're lying. You're lying. And those little details are the kinds of things that will trip you up. Because when she says in the report, that she just gave, that came out, she said, in my report, I said, Biden liked my legs, and I reported that to the Senate. Well, but Biden didn't say that. You said a staff person said that. All right, so let's look at what she said. Because again, these are the kinds of precision in language you need to keep in order to keep your credibility. You have to keep on top of this stuff. No, I don't want you, and I accept your cookies. Okay. I'm going to make sure there's no video. All right. Tara Reade, the former Senate staffer who alleges Joe Biden... Oh, sorry, Matt, I was going to talk about your mom. I'll come back to the mom and the brother. Sorry, I want to do this, and then I'll come back to it. I know I said I was going to answer it, and then I got distracted, but I will. Tara Reade, the former Senate staffer who alleges Joe Biden sexually assaulted her 27 years ago, said she filed a limited report with the Congressional Personnel Office that did not explicitly accuse him of sexual assault or harassment. Quote, I remember talking about him wanting me to serve drinks because he liked my legs and thought I was pretty, and it made me uncomfortable. Reade said in an interview Friday with the Associated Press. I know that I was too scared to write about the sexual assault. Okay, but Tara, you said you remember writing in your report that Biden wanted you to serve drinks because he liked your legs and thought you were pretty. But that's not what you said in 2019. You said you were told by a member of staff that he said that. Now, I understand that, she could convince herself maybe that this was true, but to be accurate, that is not how it happened. It wasn't Biden doing it directly. Do you understand why that's so important as a difference? It was the supervisor here who should have been written up and, the report go forward. Now, in terms of this story that she's telling, right? And in terms of what she was reporting there at the time. Okay, so her neighbor and her mother confirming her story. If you look at the Larry King, the story that the mother confirmed, if you think it was her mother on the phone, her mother did not confirm anything other than staff difficulties. Now, this is another area where Tara is not credible. Tara said that her mom called in about sexual harassment and sexual assault. That she'd called into what's his name again? Why am I forgetting it? Larry King. That's right. Larry King mother excerpt. Let's actually look at the language the mom uses. Is this yes, here we got the actual reason.com. Isn't this a such shitty web? Okay. Let's see if we get the full quote from the mom. Yep, this is it. Okay, so these are the actual words in the transcripts of the Larry King call. You can go back and check the video, Matt, right? Larry King, St. Louis, whatever, someplace in California. Hello. Caller. Yes, hello. I'm wondering what a staffer would do besides go to the press in Washington. My daughter has just left there after working for a prominent senator and could not get through with her problems at all, and the only thing she could have done was gone to the press, and she chose not to out of respect for him. King. In other words, she had a story to tell, but out of respect for the person she worked for, she didn't tell it. Caller. That's true. I don't know what you see in here that says it's a sexual harassment or a sexual assault. What this looks to me like, if you want to map it onto a version of Tara's life version stories, this is the whole, it's not about abuse of power. It's not, sorry. It fits with this framing. This is not a story about sexual misconduct. It's a story about abuse of power. It's a story when a member of Congress allows staff to threaten or belittle or bully on their behalf unchecked to maintain power rather than modify the behavior. So when it comes to this, all I see is staff problems. There's nothing in here that corroborates anything about harassment by the senator, because she says she respects, if you were a mom of a child and your child had been abused, sexually assaulted, would you call up and say your daughter's only choice was to go to the press? Why not go to the police? And in fact, Eric says that her mom told her to go to the police, and yet in this, whoever this caller is not mentioning that at all. Said the only option, right? The only thing she could do was to have gone to the press. So I don't know what you think this corroborates or established, but to me, again, if it's the whole I didn't like the staff and I had problems with the staff version of her account, yeah, that maps onto it perfectly. As to her neighbor, I don't know, are you talking about the most recent person? Tara Reade's neighbor heard her tell a story years after it happened. So although yes, she told someone it happened, it doesn't necessarily mean she told what really happened. She could tell any story she wanted. So let's see, Tara Reade's ex-neighbor. Now, it's also worth saying that this neighbor has also said she's voting for Biden. So, and the other thing I think I saw her say is that she watched the Biden. So Tara Reade called up a neighbor. Tara Reade initially said she only told her mother and her brother and the staffer at the time. And then she changed it to say, no, I've told this other person or these other people as well. So this is not in the original list of people she said she confided in. The other thing, too, is that this woman hadn't recalled it, I think, until Tara called her and reminded her. Now, maybe her memory was prompted, but again, this is, I'm just putting in some facts out there. And let's see. I'm trying to find the right quote. I know I had it somewhere on Twitter, but Brzezinski, Biden, Joe Biden, Tara Reade. Sorry. Anyway, my understanding again is that the neighbor was just someone she told years later. It wasn't contemporaneous. So it was just somebody she told it and telling. I'm not okay. Let me just put. If you have, let's say hypothetically, someone wanted to make up a story or change the something about it or whatever. Telling the story later in time doesn't mean that it happened. It just means you told it before you told it publicly. All right. So there's different levels you can establish. Like the fact that if she told people at the time, that shows that it wasn't something she invented later, that actually there's something that happened at the time period. And telling people later on is about the consistency in the story. And are the details consistent over time when she reveals it? And so I don't see the neighbor as helping, really. And the mother, it doesn't corroborate sexual harassment or abuse personally. So 9 women accusing Biden of misconduct. Matt, that's also untrue. The fact is you want to conflate boundary crossing, non-sexual touching with rape. And that really is an awful thing to do. It's a disservice, right? So when a guy crosses boundaries, I mean, I don't know how old you are, and I don't know how often you've been accosted, but growing up, I can tell you, in the 80s and the 90s, men felt they had a lot more, women's bodies were more public spaces. Looking back now, we go, it wasn't right, but that was also what women lived with. So I had a lot of guys who would just, grab you. They'd say, here, give me a kiss on the cheek. And then as soon as you get close, they turn around and kiss you. Right? Biden wasn't doing that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that happens, though. Right? Or happened. So I know of guys who cross boundaries. They were never sexual predators. And I think the fact that you have to mischaracterize what happened before. Did Lucy Flores say she felt uncomfortable? Yes. Other women have specifically said it did not feel like they were being sexually touched. And so you really need to stop spreading lies and mischaracterizing. You're weaponizing Me Too rather than really caring about the victims. And so I think there's some the women, 8 women by, I was just looking this up yesterday because someone was like, oh, he's got sexual assault allegations, and they gave me, I was like, where? And they're like, here's a link. And I looked at it, and the second person specifically rules out sexual motivation. Tara Reade said she didn't feel like it was sexualized herself. And in an AP article, she also said she didn't get a vibe like she was unsafe in a room with Biden. Again, consistency here. Biden. Is this the one? I think it might be. Okay, it wasn't the Atlantic, but it kind of has that feel to it. Right. So I know Lucy Flores did feel uncomfortable, and that's fair. Like, I don't want to discount her experiences or anything like that, but you can't lump every single woman who has talked about this as being a victim when they're not. So when Amy Lapis was a congressional aide for Rep. Jim Himes, she claimed Biden touched and rubbed his nose against her during a political fundraiser. Quote, it wasn't sexual. It wasn't sexual, but he grabbed me by the head. He put his hands around my neck and pulled me in to rub noses. When he was pulling in, I thought he was going to kiss me on the mouth. Again, boundary crossing, but she's not saying she was sexually assaulted or harassed. So, Matt, please stop. Please stop. There's also, I know, a woman who, there was a Guardian headline. Woman, Biden, mischaracterized, maybe? It's the one where he's standing, behind her. I can't, I know I had it somewhere. I think I have it in a tweet. But basically, it's the one where he's got his hands on his shoulders. Picture, maybe try that one. Yes, this one. Stephanie Carter said former vice president had his hands on her shoulder as means of offering support. Joe Biden, ex-defense secretary's wife, says viral photo used misleadingly. As Joe Biden faces intense scrutiny over his behavior to women, the wife of former Defense Secretary Ash Carter has dismissed claims that a picture of her with the former vice president is an example of unwanted touching. In a Medium post late Sunday, Stephanie Carter discussed the photo in which Biden has had his hands on her shoulders and appears to be whispering in her ear during the swearing-in ceremony for her husband in 2015. Carter writes, "As the sole owner of my story, it is high time that I reclaim it from strangers, Twitters, and the pundits and late night hosts. I won't pretend that this is the last picture. This will be the last of the picture, but it will be the last of other people speaking for me. Biden," she said, "had hugged her because he sensed she was uncharacteristically nervous and had leaned in to thank her for letting her husband serve in the Obama administration. He kept his hands on her shoulders as a means of support." So, Matt, please stop talking about other women making accusations when you don't have your facts straight. Please stop weaponizing Me Too. Please stop weaponizing Me Too. And please tell other people to stop weaponizing Me Too. Here's the other thing too, can I just say, if you have to lie about Biden's past to make Tara Reade look more credible, dude, think about that. You should have the truth and the facts on your side. So if he made other women feel uncomfortable, he made some women feel uncomfortable, other women weren't made to be felt uncomfortable. That is a hell and gone from sexual assault. Hell and gone from sexual assault. So I hope, Matt, that I have given my counterpoints and why I have really serious problems and reservations with Tara Reade's account, why I don't find her credible, and barring someone else showing up to verify they were a witness or that it happened to them, I think we're just going to have to move on from this. So, right. A lot of people only later realized what happened to them was really abuse, therefore it's not a fair standard. True. I mean, I stipulate that. I don't want to speak from personal experience, but I can speak from personal experience about what it's like to come to terms with an assault. And it's hard to admit that has happened to you. But we're not talking about 1993. We're talking about, in this case, a woman who volunteered to write a piece and use her own words in 2019. And she has a law background at that point, and she knows about evidence and standards of evidence and corroboration and everything else. She's not an idiot, right? And then she goes and deceptively edits it without revealing she's made changes to give the impression that she's been talking about sexual harassment and abuse since 2019. That's not coming forward with new information. Again, it's her lack of transparency that just gets me. It's her complete lack of transparency. And the fact that she's not transparent about basically doing a 180 from exculpating Biden from any sexual misconduct, but it's about power, to saying, no, actually, this is my sort of shady way of implying that he assaulted me by adding one word, completely changing the meaning of the sentence, and then not being honest about it. For me, she's done. For me, she's done. You, again, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So anyway, I hope, Matt, if nothing else, you understand, like I do, that reasonable people with good intentions can disagree on this. And it doesn't make the other person a bad person. Chrisiosity, I know, believes Tara Reade. Highly critical, believes Tara Reade. Last time I checked, Essence of Thought, believe Tara Reade. I love and adore and respect all of those people. I also come to a completely different conclusion. And my conclusion, and part of this is informed by the fact that I was falsely accused of doxing Bering when it was, well, one, Bearing doxed himself by putting his own name on his channel, on his music channel, and then putting his own like music video stuff in his video, in his Bearing channel, so that there was a link between them. And it was Cobalt Cat, who was an editor at Encyclopedia Dramatica, that published his information. Like it's actually listed as the person who published it. But Bearing didn't get money or attention or notoriety for being doxed by Cobalt Cat. It was way more fun for him to make the accusation against me. So I've been in a position where I had to get my ducks in a row. And the other thing too, I worked in a Senate legislative office, and I worked it on the state level. But one thing we did was we documented. Document. You document correspondence. You document notes from phone calls. All of that stuff. Because you need to, at some point, you might need to cover your butt, or you might need to go back to it and have reliable, information for some reason. And so, working in a Senate office, you should know the importance of documenting things. And I kind of forget where I was going with this, but Tara Reade has failed on all of those things. So where was I? Let's see. I haven't completely looked into her blog and editing. Yeah, and again, Matt, go into the description box. Oh yeah, we were talking about reasonable disagreement. I'm trying to be as transparent as the original author, who I think gets so much credit. This person, I don't know who Roman's research is, but you can literally click on every link, and you can go like we have and go through the source code, and you can go through and compare, article for article to make and I had the time to do that. I did that before we went on air. So fair enough. This is your first presentation. Go ahead and look at it for yourself. But what I'm hoping, and I know on Twitter it's not easy, can we stop demonizing people who have a reasonable disagreement on this? I think in terms of the media, they're going to move on from this story. She's been eviscerated in the press. And there will be pockets of support for her probably all the way through the campaign. But at this point, because she mismanaged her communications and mismanaged the facts that she put out and how she put out and when she put out, all that kind of stuff, she's destroyed her own credibility. Like I said, I don't think she's ever going to come back from this. The only thing she can hope for now is, if this is actually what happened, and that, and there's a usual pattern of predatorship, that other people will come forward at this point. But please stop demonizing people who come to a reasonable disagreement with you. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I wanted to go over in substance. That was what this to me was nail in the coffin kind of stuff. And there's a lot of noise around this. Again, I also want to just call out, anyone who thinks they're helping Biden by bringing this woman down and trashing her, you're really not. I do want to say this. I saw Joe Biden do his Morning Joe thing. Well, I saw the coverage of it. I couldn't see it because I live in Germany. But what struck me is, even though he is saying, I didn't do this, I'm going to be honest and transparent, she has her right to say things, and I have my right to give my defense. Joe Biden could do this without demeaning Tara Reade, right? Joe Biden is doing this without undermining her sanity in public. He's not, how's the word, how am I going to say this? He's not dehumanizing her or making her look, basically, he's not trying to elevate himself by bringing her down. He's talking about her and her accusations in a way that she's got her accusations and I've got facts and my things that I want to say. And then it's up to you guys to look into it and make up your own minds. The press should look into it. Please investigate this. If you compare that with what Trump does, calling women liars and dogs and basically stripping them of their humanity. I want Dems and people who vote for Biden to be better than that. So I understand this is such a difficult issue for so many people, because for people who have been affected by sexual assault or harassment, any kind of abuse, these kinds of stories touch on how there is an an innate sense of connecting with your own experiences to kind of check what sounds familiar and what doesn't. And so for people who have that in their background, these kinds of stories, when you engage in them in a long time, it really brings up lots of bad memories, lots of bad feelings, and it's very emotionally difficult, and people get emotionally sensitive because they're going into a place that they were made to be feel vulnerable and unprotected and unsafe. So can we just maybe not be so vicious when we have these disagreements? I know it's probably words in the wind, especially when it comes to Twitter, and I have no influence. But I've been trying to model fairness. I've been trying to focus on statements and evidence and credibility. And credibility based on consistency, not who she praised or who she, her opinions on what candidate. All right. Shoo. Yeah. I didn't really know that it was going as long as this, but it has. It's kind of taken up the whole episode. I think what I might do now is I'll go ahead and give you guys a little bit of time for a lag. Matt Young, thank you for sticking with and having a fair hearing of a presentation. And also, asking why I don't find certain things credible and giving me the opportunity to demonstrate how I think that some of the things that people point out in her favor are actually flaws. I'll kind of wait for a little bit and look back. People can say, let's see what people have in the chat. They were saying, beware confirmation bias. It skews how you interpret things. Andrew, that's an excellent point. And it's something that, it's not like, the Biden people all suffer from confirmation bias and the Tara Reade supporters don't, or it's only the Tara Reade supporters who suffer from bias. And that, you're right. And we all have that. And we all need to be self-checking as much as possible. There are times when I will just say, I give into my confirmation bias. When I see Republicans, a perfect example. Donald Trump refuses to use the Defense Production Act to force companies in America to produce testing kit materials for the coronavirus tests or ventilators. But he will use the Defense Production Act to force workers to make themselves vulnerable and go back to work in meatpacking plants, possibly exposing themselves or family members to a deadly disease so that everyone else can have a hamburger? And that to me confirms that, Trump and Republicans are evil. I'm not going to do a lot of work to check that confirmation bias. In these cases, though, being open about where your perspective is and where you're coming from and where you're, the framing you bring to a situation. That is why I think sticking to written statements, comparing written statements over time is a way to pull on that confirmation bias drag and try to keep it a little bit more in check. Because I'm gonna be completely honest. If someone came forward with a second accusation and it was completely credible, and I will go on the record saying this, so if this happens, you can pull me up on it. Let's say we have the anti-terror Reade comes forward, like someone who hadn't manipulated her previous writings and then covered it up. You get somebody who is more like a Dr. Ford, someone who saw the Tara Reade nightmare, got an attorney, took some lie detector tests, got her documents in a row, came forward and said, to the best of my recollection, this happened to me in these situations, and this was how I da 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 da. And with Ford, I was convinced that they were being honest and that the other person didn't have a good response. It had some dodgy responses and had a pattern, I don't think I could vote for Biden. I don't think I can vote for a rapist. I don't think I can knowingly vote for a rapist. I just don't. I would have to not vote. And that would be huge for me. But I don't think in good conscience. So, for me, it's kind of weird because I'm to the point where, I looked at it from are these accusations credible? Because it does have such an impact on my vote. And when I looked into Tara Reade, she didn't give me that confidence. So I'm okay, she has this accusation, but I don't have any I can't, based on what she said, say that Biden is a rapist. I can't. So in that case, I mean, I can still vote for somebody because I'm not there yet to where I actually think he's done anything. She hasn't convinced me that this event happened the way she said it happened, or that he was the one who did it. If another woman came out, or 3 women came out, or 5 women came out, whatever it was, and I was convinced, I would have to not vote for him. I would just not vote, I think. So I personally, I don't get people who say, I believe Tara Reade and I'm voting for Biden anyway. Like, I don't, like, again, I'm not going to judge people who say that, like, but for me, I can't. So is part of my confirmation bias that I'm looking for these credibility holes in Tara Reade's story because I couldn't vote for a rapist? Maybe, but I think in this case, I'm trying to check that by really looking and being fair about the evidence and what would I expect from anybody. So yeah, confirmation bias can be an influence. And I think the way to pull on that is to make sure that you are tying yourself to something that is the least likely to let you give into that bias. All right, so is that enough time for lag? Let's see what you guys are saying. Both parties are terrible. There needs to be more choice. Yeah, well, I mean, don't hate the player, hate the game. Like, the fact is that it was the voters who chose Biden in the end. And if you want someone else to be chosen, you got to go out there and do your work and just do grassroots organizing. As much as I agree, Sean Moonshire, the question remains how to fix the problem. It is possible in the near future for a third party to gain power. So the problem with the problem with first past the post is that it tends toward a majoritarian system. Wow, that sounds like a total political science thing to say. If you have winner takes all, sorry. Yeah, all kinds of stuff caught in my chest today. When you have a winner-takes-all system and you have, let's say, a Green Party and a Left Party and then a united right-wing party, because the Left and the Greens are going to split the vote, it's more likely that the Conservatives in that case would win the seat. Same way if you have a far-right party and a moderate conservative party and only one party on the left, it's more likely than not that the Left Party, will get a bigger enough plurality. They don't need a majority anymore. They just need a plurality of the vote, which is easier to get if you're splitting on the political left or right. Therefore, in a first-past-the-post system, what it makes most sense for the parties to do, the most rational thing in a rational choice theory, is for the parties to try to appeal to the most number of voters over the widest part of the political spectrum. So the left will try to hover around the center while also reaching out to the farther left voters in order to get 50% plus 1. And same thing on the right, rather than splitting into 2 parties, which would only split the vote, they will try to be as expansive and as inclusive. This is again, rational choice, not how it always works in reality. So if you're trying to maximize your vote, you will basically be a Big Tent party. If you are an ideological party, so this is if you're trying to maximize your vote, that's the rationality, that's the rationale, that's your logic, is you want to cover the most political space of the median voter and your core in order to get 50% plus 1. If you're an ideological party, you don't care about any of that because you just care about ideology. You don't care about winning. You care about getting your message out. You care about having, a platform, but you don't expect policy successes. So the way that, what you'd have to have, and which would take, I think, a constitutional amendment to change the federal system into some kind of PR system. It would be a major issue. And it's just not sort of economically or resource-wise feasible for third parties to run and be successful in a national federal election, especially not an office like the White House. So yeah, don't hate the player, hate the game. Let's see. Unless something really weird happens next year, either Trump or Biden are going to be president. Yep. Frankly, even with a centrist candidate, the stakes are enormous. Look how many people have died. I know that Justin Amash is running as a libertarian. Good. For people who are never Trumpers, I'm quite happy for them to vote against Trump. And in some ways, I think that's kind of true. Obviously, I provide a Biden presidency, but he was never my candidate. He was basically default choice. I had one candidate, and then I sort of floated for months on end, and then eventually there was only one left. So that's who I'm supporting. But yeah, with Justin Amash coming in, it might be the case that some never Trumpers will vote for him, which I think would probably have more of effect in red states maybe than purple states, because I think people understand the importance of tactical voting. People know that they live in a swing state. They understand that where they place their votes matter. And you see that with burners on social media who are like, I'm in California, it doesn't matter how I vote. And technically they're right. For their California vote, that's fine. But it's not that I necessarily have a problem with people tactically voting in a deep red state. Which one is? Wait, no, blue is the conservatives in Britain, but the Democrats in America. So if you're in a deep blue state and you can afford to throw away your vote, that's fine. But please don't tell people in Ohio to do that. Please don't tell people in Wisconsin or Michigan. I don't model that kind of behavior for people who don't live in deep blue states. That's my caution. I don't believe a Democratic president would have let COVID reach this level. I also agree. I think if you look at the two nations that are doing the worst on COVID, they both had the most incompetent leadership who kind of, I mean, even though Donald Trump, I guess we can look coronavirus world, coronavirus world is the heuristic I've been using of late. The two nations that did the least in terms of actually preparing. I mean, Trump basically had a default herd immunity approach, and Boris Johnson had an active herd immunity approach for the first 2 weeks until they realized, oh my goodness gracious, people are going to die. And then they started to backpedal, and it was already, for a lot of people, it was already too late. But absolutely the most incompetent leadership of this globally has been Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump laps Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson is the king of the numpties, the king of the murderers, the king of the incompetent manslaughter, second-degree manslaughter of Europe. And he's just, that's where he is right now. Because as you can see, you know, the UK had weeks of notice watching what was happening in Italy. And I get that they're an island and it might feel a little bit farther away. Germany, we're like one country over from Italy. We're not that far from Italy. But the way that Germany has handled this, 6,812 deaths. And we were closer to Italy and we had earlier cases, right? Compare that with the UK, which is currently at 28,000. Probably this weekend they will exceed Italy. Remember the crisis? Remember the hospital aisles filled up? Remember them talking about in Italy they were having to put 2 and 4 people on the single ventilator just to try to make their resources go? Remember how the doctors in Italy were being forced to triage what patients would get ventilators, and younger people were being preferred to older people? And in all of that chaos and all of that mess, the UK is now about to pass them in terms of the number of deaths, with all the advance warning, with an NHS system in place and ready to go. And this wasn't, I don't know how they're not criminally held liable. And I understand that when you have sovereign immunity. I don't know if you guys know about this concept. I understand it. Is that how? Yep. Sovereign immunity. When you're a leader, you have to make decisions that will result in people dying. But unfortunately, if you're going to be like on a level of a presidency, something like that, that's just eventually you're going to have those decisions to make. Whether it's death penalty cases or war or whatever else. But then there's just recklessness. There's incompetence. So sovereign immunity or crown immunity is a legal doctrine whereby a sovereign or state cannot commit a legal wrong and it is immune from a civil suit or criminal prosecution. Strictly speaking, in modern text, in its own court. A similar, stronger rule as regards foreign courts is namely state immunity. Immunity from suit means that neither a sovereign or head of state in person, nor in absentia or representative form, nor to a lesser extent the state can be a defendant or subject of a court proceedings, nor in the most equivalent forms such as under arbitration awards and tribunal awards and damages. Immunity from enforcement means that even if a person succeeds in any way against their sovereign or state, they in the judgments they may find themselves without means of enforcement. Otherwise, yeah, Trump would be sued into bankruptcy 10 times over for his incompetence, I think. So we need to get some realistic approach, like some real on here. And I saw stupid, like Nate Silver has such a mix of good and bad takes. But he basically said, oh, if you look at the US, we're not doing so bad as countries in Europe. Look at the UK. And like, the UK is doing the worst. The UK is doing the worst of all. Why would you compare America to the worst country case in Europe? Why wouldn't you compare it to the competency of a country like Germany? Considering that America is protected by an ocean and is far richer. And the executive there has like way more power. Angela Merkel still has to negotiate with state leaders and heads. She can't do, like, as far as I'm concerned, like, as far as I know, a sort of Defense Production Act where she just takes over an industry or orders people back to work, like Trump does. And yet, he was nowhere. He's nowhere to be found. All right. Well, y'all, I think we're done. I mean, I thought the Tara Reade thing would go for like a half hour. I'm really sorry. I talked so long about that, and I really didn't mean to. But on the other hand, I literally had nothing else prepared. So people in the chat seem to have kind of moved on to other conversations. So, I mean, I probably talked it to death. And so, a few other updates then. Due to a family crisis, last night, I learned about half hour before we went online, our D&D show was canceled, so we've pushed that back for a week. Other than saying it was like a personal situation or a personal crisis, I really don't feel comfortable giving the details because they're not my details to give. But I do, because I booked it for last night and I talked about it, I did feel a sense of ownership to let people know that it was postponed, not because we forgot about you or insulting you. It's just something came up beyond our control. And then the other thing, too, is to say, I don't know when we're going to do a happy hour again, but I have been in talks with Kevin. I was expecting to do D&D last night, and then we didn't. So now I've done like 3 days of not being on YouTube without doing a happy hour. So it's very, very possible that tonight or tomorrow night we will do another happy hour with some more quizzes and try to just escape the coronavirus reality by living in an alternate bubble of time where it just doesn't exist and it doesn't touch us in our minds. So thank you guys for sticking with me. I know that this will probably get me a lot of hate. I had 4 downvotes on this video before I even said anything. So clearly I will get some feedback and I'm sure blowback on this. But at the end of the day, I can't do anything other than follow the facts. I guess you can disagree with my takes or not, but the one thing you can say is that I don't come out here and give views just because they're popular. That you know where you stand with me, and you don't have to worry that I am saying things for popularity, because I oftentimes don't get more popular when I say things. But I also can't lie to you guys. I can't lie to myself. So again, I think reasonable people can agree to disagree. And I will be honest with you about things. Okay. I think that's going to be done. That's going to be it until the next happy hour or the next weekend winters. So thank you guys for stopping by. Thank you for taking the time to listen and your patience with me and everything else. I think maybe what I can do is just to kind of close out the show. I can kind of bring up some of the music, make it sound like, woo, yay, end of the show kind of time. Yeah, I've been Christy. You guys have been awesome. I will continue to read the chat a little bit after the show. And until next time, bye.